There's your green sign, son. This is Life Review number 3. Okay, this is Life Review number 3. We're going to start with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I've already talked to you, and most of you already know who she is. A paragraph. I'm on page 35. There are no coincidences. God is not a punitive, nasty God. After you make the transition, then you come to what has been described as hell and heaven. What we hear from our friends who have passed over, people who came back to share with us, is that every human being after this transition is going to have to face something that looks very much like a television screen. You will be given an opportunity not to be judged by a judgmental God, but to judge yourself by having to review every single action, every word, and every thought of your life. You make your own hell or your own heaven by the way you have lived. I include her because she just points it out specifically that we are making our own heaven or hell. Others allude to it, but they don't say it. Next one. This comes from Heavenly Answers for Earthly Challenges by Joyce H. Brown. I'm quoting from page 86. Actually, it's 87. A great question then emanated from him, capitalized, to me so strongly that it completely penetrated my being. In life, what did you do with what you had? Rapidly, the question engulfed me, commanding an answer. I'm working on a list of questions that people are asking their life review. We got Moody's, or Richie's, what have you done with your life? But several others come up with different questions that they're asked. I began answering defensively with reasons and excuses as I had in life when I felt I was being called to task for failure to reach a goal. It was easy to find someone or something to blame for my failures. I could justify myself with reasons other than my own shortcomings for my actions, feelings, or failure to accomplish certain tasks. I believe my excuses were good reasons to explain why I hadn't accomplished more. My difficult childhood, others getting in my way, my poor health, a broken home, my continual strife with my mother, lack of opportunities, and my growing family of children who held me back. More excuses came welling up within me. If only I had been blessed with strong, supportive parents and raised in an atmosphere of love and acceptance. If I had had a happy, successful marriage. If only I had more money. I was stopped short in my thinking as I felt all my excuses melting into this light. I felt the thoughts and the words coming from this being of love and light. The question has nothing to do with what you did not have in life, or with your burdens or faults or problems, but rather in life, what did you do with what you did have? Oh, the humility and the guilt I felt at that moment. All of my life's actions were seen and known. I couldn't hide them or cover them, and my carefully erected walls of excuses that had shielded me from accepting responsibility melted around me. All that was left was just me and the being of love and light who knew everything about me. I could not rely on or blame anyone else. This question was directed solely at me. I was being measured against no one else. I stood alone, on my own. What did I do with my life? With what I had? My opportunities, my time on earth? What had I done with what I did have? Suddenly I realized that difficulties during earth life were really opportunities. I recognized how problems could be blessings when viewed from the other side. On earth, the goal is to win. It is certainly the overriding desire of sports teams. Winning is the measure of success during earth life. Winning means fame and money. Losers are remembered only if the circumstances are humorous, sad, or if the loss is embarrassingly big. The label of loser is energetically avoided. Competition is fierce in most aspects of mortal life, from entrance requirements to college to parking spaces at the shopping mall. I was amazed to realize that in the afterlife sphere, there is no win or lose, no competition with anyone else. Only what I did with what I had mattered. What I did not have was irrelevant. Now, as I think I shared with you earlier when we quoted Joyce Brown, that much of her book is a life review, and she uses it to teach. And that's what she's doing right now. If only I had known to teach my family to do the best they could without the emphasis on winning or losing, to pay attention to how they live the game of life. Life actually is like a game in a way, but the score that matters is not determined by wins and losses according to the world standard, but by doing the best we can with what we have. I now understand that there was no real defeat on earth, only my own choices of attitudes and actions mattered. The important thing was to have kept going, to have looked for solutions, to have striven and endured well until the end of life, to have desired and to have kept trying to live in harmony with eternal truths. I realized the need for everyone to help the world be a better place for those living, as well as for those future generations. You remember that she was the one that was going to commit suicide and went into the bathroom and knelt over the tub and prayed and left her body, and now is having her review. In many ways, what I had not done with my life seemed more significant than what I had done to this point. I knew that every day I have lived on earth, I had exchanged a day of my life's time for whatever I had chosen to do that day. Many days I had squandered my fortune of time, and I saw what I had thrown away. I was very aware that there is eternal joy to be reaped for seeking to do kind deeds. and from not being easily offended on earth or for eternity. I realize that we don't have to be perfect during earth life, just sincerely caring and making an effort to become more loving, charitable, and forgiving, and less judgmental. The desires and intent of the heart are so significant. As I understood earth life's purposes from an eternal perspective, I became aware that miracles happened abundantly and more easily for those who believed in them. Also, I knew my station or level of life was not as important as the direction I was going, and whether or not I was moving toward eternal goals, appreciating opportunities and striving to improve. On the other side, I learned that trying counts, and all sincere efforts are recognized, with accompanying just rewards. My life review showed me with complete clarity that every choice I had made in attitude, thought, or action had an inescapable, wanted or unwanted consequence. I alone was responsible for what I had done with my life. Joyce Brown. Is there another one in here? No. Okay. Heaven or Hell by Emanuel Swedenborg. A little bit of Emanuel. You can look him up on Wikipedia, but he was born in 1688 in Stockholm, Sweden, and lived about 90 years, I think it was 70, 72, 18. But he was a scientist, an inventor, a theologian, a teacher, and a mystic. In the latter part of his life, the last 28 years or so, he had this unique experience of passing through the veil into the spirit world. And he did this many, many times over a 13-year period. As a result of those experiences and his theological and scientific background, he began to formulate ideas, and over the course of 28 years, he published 18 volumes on various topics stemming from his visits into the spirit world, and consequently his philosophies changed. And so I'm going to read just briefly here a paragraph from Swedenborg. As spirit people, we enjoy every outer and inner sense we enjoyed in the world. We see the way we used to do. We hear and talk the way we used to. We smell and taste and feel things when we touch them the way we used to. We want, wish, crave, think, ponder, are moved, love, and intend the way we used to. Studious types still read and write as before. In a word, when we move from the one life into the other, or from the one world into the other, it is like moving from one physical place to another. And we take with us everything we owned as persons, to the point that it would be unfair to say that we had lost anything of our own after death, which is only a death of the earthly body. We even take with us our natural memory, since we retain everything we have ever heard, seen, read, learned or thought in the world from earliest infancy to the very end of life. However, since the natural eyes that reside in our memory cannot be reproduced in a spiritual world, they become dormant the way they do when we are not thinking about them. Even so, they can be reproduced when it so pleases the Lord. I will have more to say soon, though, about this memory and its condition after death. I think I mentioned it, but there are scriptures that talk about things here on the earth being recorded in heaven and in our own body. Okay. I'm getting better at making these shorter. This signal to my editor that is, and that was only 16 minutes and 38 seconds. My, am I getting better at this. Okay, we're now going to go on sorry, but that's okay. He can edit this out. We're now going to go on to Life Review number 4. Okay, this segment we're going to begin with Ned Doherty in his book Fast Lane to Heaven. And I'll spell that for you. Dougherty is D-O-U-G-H-E-R-T-Y. Fast Lane to Heaven, and his life review takes up over 20 pages, and I'm not going to read them all. I'm going to do the same thing that I have done previously. I'll read a little bit of introduction, page and a half, and then I will go through some highlighting so that you get the flow of his life review. But if you want the details, you're going to have to purchase the book. What a plug. And I'm not even being paid for it. Here we go. On page 34, the visual reality of the crystalline sphere was different from my concept of reality that I had ever experienced. I was enveloped in a realm of consciousness devoid of time or space. As I acclimated myself to this environment, I was given an orientation on how the process would proceed. I was aware that I was about to review every event, thought, emotion, and experience of my life. I became aware that the purpose of the review was for me to evaluate my life in terms of my intended mission as a human, to review my life in a manner that permitted me to focus on the areas that provided the most important experiences in terms of my spiritual growth and development. Good purpose of life reviews. spiritual growth and development. Although I was alone in the crystalline sphere, I was aware that I was in the presence of God and watched over by the many spiritual beings in the amphitheater who were encouraging me with their love and support. Nothing about my life was a secret to God, nor to the spiritual beings, yet I did not perceive that I was being judged. I realized that all who are part of God's spiritual creation had fallen from God and had made mistakes in their own journeys. There was no one among the assemblage of spiritual beings who was about to cast the first stone at me. I was going to need support to give me the courage and the strength to review my life. Before proceeding with surgery on a physical body, an anesthesiologist administers drugs to block out the pain. In the spiritual world, the opposite effect is desired during the life review. I was provided with the spiritual strength to soberly review my life for the first time ever without my blocking it out to avoid the reality of what I had experienced. That's an interesting concept. I realized it was I who would be conducting the review. What had I done with my life? Where was my life going? There's a couple of questions. What had I done to show love of God, love of my neighbor, love of self? What had I done to be of service to mankind? These were the important questions I would have to consider as he watched his life review. Since the crystalline sphere was not encumbered by the limiting properties of time and space, I was going to re-experience my life with the same intensity with which it was originally experienced. I would be in control of the review and have the ability to slow the process and concentrate on the lessons to be learned during significant experiences. Suddenly, the surface of the crystalline sphere dissolved from its translucent state into a grayish, opaque surface. My life review began as the surface of the sphere came alive with a vivid and lifelike scene that took me back to my infancy. The scene was not just lifelike, it was reality itself. I was a third-person witness to events that I had not previously witnessed. My life review began in a scene on the evening of March the 21st, 1947. In a boisterous, overcrowded, and smoky high school gymnasium in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, I recognized my young father. He was pacing up and down the sidelines, coaching his team. His face was beet red, and his neck and facial muscles bulged as he screamed out his orders. Now I'm going to paraphrase. Small town, basketball tournament. They get into the championships. Everybody's excited. Big time. They're playing a school from Pittsburgh, and it's down to the end of the game. The crowd's going crazy, and the last shot that would have won the game doesn't go through the hoop. This experience changes his father, who is now embarrassed and ashamed and withdraws, in essence, over a period of time. And I'm not going to read you all the details, but it's in his life review. His life review goes for almost 35 pages, perhaps more. And in his life review, he watches his father come home one night drunk and beat his mother, and shoves her down the stairs. And he sees this because he's also at the bottom of the stairs. Anyway, the marriage falls apart, and his father becomes an alcoholic. And literally over a period of time, many years, he drinks himself to death. Well, this Ned, they're Irish Catholic, and they have their traditions, and they always go to the pub or the bar with the others. And at 5 years old, Ned has his first drink of beer, and now he's a man. And he remembers the feelings of hearing all these Irish friends of his dad at the bar shouting and praising that now he's a man, he's had a drink of beer. Okay? So I'm skipping a lot. He goes to high school, wants to be a basketball player. The distance between he and his father is immense, and he always sees his father on the same bar stool in this bar, drinking, and that goes on for years. Of course, he lost his job, and they're divorced. I'll just add a comment here. Our Catholicism was an integral part of our lives at that time. I was growing up in a Catholic school, going to Mass, confession, and communion. During Lent, Graham's grandma, and I would say the rosary every night. Religion was spoon-fed, and we didn't question what we were taught. We just accepted it. Every year we would have religious retreat weeks. This meant that visiting priests would come to the church and the school and terrorize us in a more focused attention to our religious obligations. I remember that these retreats were also very enlightening. So now he's playing basketball. And he sees his father come into the gymnasium, and his father is drunk. And he's shouting out something to his son, which catches him off guard, and he dribbles the ball off his foot and out of bounds. And his father just kind of waves him off and says some comments about his son's basketball ability. And so this continues. He says here, he would walk past the candy store and back to school, passing the tavern window. Usually my dad would be sitting there. He always seemed to be distant from me. So from the age of 5 up to when he graduates from high school, he doesn't have much of a relationship with his dad. He moves to New York City to live with his mother and her new husband. He goes to college. He was invited to a party at Phi Kappa Tau, the best fraternity on campus. And what I remember of that party was that I chugged a lot of beer. Mentions down here, my life review continues. He goes to visit his father, and his father is in the tavern. And he goes in, sits down, and they have some beers together and talk. And they're there all afternoon. And this is an experience that he remembers before his father dies. As the afternoon drew on, I noticed that Dad would hold his glass in his burly hand while he twisted it slowly, counterclockwise, in a continuous motion. So, New Year's Eve, 1973, he and his girlfriend Jenny drive up to Hazleton to visit his father. I read this. On New Year's Day, we took Dad to breakfast. He sat across from us, and for the first time in his life, I saw some happiness, almost contentment, in his smile. I could tell he was happy for me, and that now, somewhere in his sad and lonely life, there was some fulfillment. He had a relationship with his son, and I knew that it meant something to him. Dad didn't eat breakfast, and I realized that I had never seen him eat food. Now he's in college. And think about the implications. It was during the month of June 1974 when I got the call. Dad had been admitted to St. Joseph's Hospital in Hazleton and transferred quickly to a hospital in Scranton. The doctor suggested that I come to Scranton to meet with him. That afternoon I was sitting before the doctor in Scranton as he described Dad's condition. He had advanced cirrhosis of the liver. The doctor had already given me the prognosis, but I continued to ask questions, choosing not to hear what he had said. Dad was going to get better. It was just that simple. Nothing else would be acceptable. Well, his dad didn't get better. After we buried Dad in St. Gabriel Cemetery, Jenny and I decided to go away for a while. Instead of turning east on Interstate 80 and going back to New York, we decided to drive west without a plan. Several days later, I was driving across Nebraska and thinking about my life with Dad. Now this is all part of his life review. Jenny was taking a nap as we were traveling west on Interstate 80, crossing the rolling plains. I was listening to a new song on the radio, Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin. When I listened to the words, I heard a story similar to the story of my life with Dad. I'm going to be like you, Dad. You know, I'm going to be like you. I sat staring into the rear view mirror for an eternal moment, watching the ghost of my dad in the back seat. He continues, I was still enveloped in a vivid realm of consciousness as my life review traveled through my past. I didn't have a problem with inheriting my father's disease, alcoholism. Actually, I welcomed it. I enjoyed drinking. It was my best friend. Besides, there was no reason why I could not continue to drink. I looked at my drinking as a gift, not as a curse. Although I really readily accepted that I was an alcoholic like my dad, my alcoholism was something that I had under control. Then he goes into a part of his life where he starts seeing himself sitting in the pub. And he has a vision, so to speak, a dream, and he starts a nightclub in called Marrakesh, and he goes through. It was a Moroccan theme. It came from the movie Casablanca, and so he's very successful, and he wants to do another one in New York City, and unbeknownst to him at the time, the mafia is involved, and he ends up, doesn't give the real reasons, but he ends up, because of the influence of the mafia, he cannot build. So in the spring of 1978, I found a second Marrakesh site in West Palm Beach. So now he's got two. And looking at the third one, this is where the mafia comes in New York. And he moves from alcoholism to drugs. My life review continued as the next several years became a blur of scenes spiraling downward into a life of darkness and danger. Drug dealers became cultural icons and nightclub celebrities, and they started to sell cocaine. He's in a whirlpool that's taking him down. Okay, now I'm going to quote, and this will end his review. By outward appearance, it was a typical Saturday night at Club Marrakesh of the Palm Beaches, and by outward appearances, I was my usual self at the club. I was wearing a custom-tailored designer tuxedo fitted at a Worth Avenue boutique, an expensive shirt of Egyptian cotton, hand-tied bow, black Gucci loafers, and a Rolex watch. I had easily adopted Palm Beach's standards of class. Then he has this experience. Into cocaine, becomes a part of the scene, and I'll finish with this. I stood at the bar thinking that perhaps my dad was still alive somewhere, somehow. Maybe he was there with me in some ghostly form at that moment, watching me. I wondered if he was proud of his son, proud of what I had accomplished. But then I wondered if he was there to tell me that my life was out of control, out of sync, a crazy life, a life in turmoil, disintegrating, out of balance, a state of life that perhaps called for another way of living. Just as suddenly as the sounds and the lights had diminished and the scene had slowed down, it returned and intensified like an ocean wave, and a rushing, whooshing sound came past me from behind, and I was back in the reality of the nightclub scene. I snapped out of my melancholy. It must have been something I had eaten, I thought. Perhaps I was just tired. Perhaps I was having some kind of a mental relapse, some anomaly or syndrome, or thinking gone wrong. I decided it must have been the champagne. Perhaps I needed a change from Dom Perignon. I can't say this, I don't drink, sorry. Dom Perignon, Perigonon. You guys are laughing at me, but I don't care, it doesn't matter. I instructed the bartender to open a bottle of Perrier Jouet, Jouet, for a change. Then I looked down at the long stem champagne flute in my hand. I noticed that I had been turning the glass in my hand counterclockwise, around and around. It was a habit I had developed unconsciously. I continued to think about my life, and the glass continued to turn counterclockwise in my hand. I'm just like my dad, I thought, as my life review ended. He goes on to a whole bunch of other interesting things in his near-death experience, but that's his life review. And I'm going to end this one and start another one. Gotta get my little pink thing here. It's my signal to my editor.